Do we understand the dynamism when we try to look inward and say this is what we want to do? For instance, what's the understanding of the people? I was going through the speech of Mr. Fashola at the pensions, more or less like the pension summit, and quite a lengthy speech, but every paragraph you see made meaning and you can actually relate to it. You bring up policies and programs that can help the people, and perhaps maybe you sign an agreement with maybe some other big organizations within and even outside. And once that comes in, what kind of knowledge do you think that the people can get so that they know that this is something that they can benefit? They don't turn around at the end of the day when they start to benefit, they start to protest against such. You know, when you talk about knowledge now, you bring in it in a perspective that people don't really understand what a government, states now are doing. So how can they embrace such when they finally see the good in it?
You see, what I mean by knowledge here is investment in education. For instance, we need to valorize investment in entrepreneurial education. What this means is that people will be business-minded. When they leave these centers of learning, they will no longer just be helpless, looking for jobs that may not always be created for them. They will be able to create employment for themselves. We need to invest in technical education. Look at Japan, look at Taiwan. They don't have the kind of extensive natural resources that we have, and which is why the economies are stronger, because these economies are not susceptible to the vagaries of international, commodity prices. If you invest in human capital development, people will use the knowledge to create wealth. Even when they go into agriculture, they will not go into agriculture simply because they want to, subsist. They want to mechanize the industry. That's what they did in Thailand. That's what they did in the US. That's what they are doing in Malaysia. So the point I'm making is that if you're looking at, states, for instance, that can't pay salaries, one, they could, diversify, their tax regime. Try to see whether there are internally generated tax regimes that they can, in fact, dynamize in such a way that their internal collections will be better, rather than simply wait until the federal government makes allocations. Because, you see, the federal government's basic allocation comes from crude oil sales. And we've seen over the past 1 year that the prices have, this time last year it was $130, per barrel. This morning is gravitating towards $32, $30 per barrel. So you don't want to allow the economy to be subjected to this kind of susceptibilities. What you want to do is to say, how can we make sure that our economy is not simply based on natural resources? Look at the economies in South Africa, for instance. Just a second. Look at the economy in South Africa. They have platinum. But then the fruits that we eat, the apples and the grapes and all of these pears that we eat right here in Nigeria are from the farms in South Africa. And we have the soil patterns and weather patterns here in this country to grow all of those kind of food. If you go to South Africa, the industrial economy is big because it's industrialized, it's mechanized. So how do you mechanize such a sector without investment in research and development in agronomy? So to do that, you need a great deal of knowledge. That is why I think that this glib talk about simply wanting to, go into agriculture as a way of diversifying the economy doesn't quite capture the complexity of that sector. You need to mechanize it. We've been in agriculture. It has always been subsistent. Subsistent economies do not succeed. What you need to do is to mechanize
What we also know in the past, we all read, when we did a bit of history, I understand it's not being taught anymore, but when a bit of social studies and history were being taught in schools, that the country sustained itself on agriculture, and we think that most times it was through farmers' cooperatives and all. The country was able to make some money from that before oil came, and perhaps maybe that's the glory past that they're trying to regain. But away from that, we also do know that the way many countries have survived these days is that they have saved in the days of fat, as it were. We've seen countries who made a lot of money from crude oil, use that money to diversify and ensure that their country is sustainable and it's not susceptible to these vagaries. But that has not been our case. We've seen that, it would seem that we've wasted those years when we did have plenty. And so it would take some time now for us to be able to go back there. Where we are right now is dire straits. What do you think that states can do? You're giving the example of your state, but some people will say, if crude oil and the companies in Port Harcourt did not exist, do you think that River State will be able to survive?
We are mechanizing fishing. We are mechanizing fishing. We can't possibly be surrounded by water and yet not mechanize fishing. So these are the new directions. But to mechanize it, you need investment in research and development, and that's what we are doing. You see, this may not be very glamorous to talk about, especially for politicians, because they don't make the headlines and people don't see the immediate results. But what the governor's attitude to this is, look, why don't we take a very sober look? And which was why in all of the states of this country, our own budget was the first to say, look, we are going to make sure that we peg our budget based on 36%, even at the time when the federal government's budget was originally pegged at 39%. The governor recognizes that, look, in the final analysis, we're not going to depend on oil and gas, and which is why there's a massive investment in infrastructure. One thing, you see, that the governor has achieved over the past 7 months is that, he's literally reindustrializing the state. Over 90 kilometers of road have been tarred, completed. What this means is that businesses are booming, small, medium, and small scale industries are coming up.
Sorry, Chamberlain. Someone is asking now that you're talking about investing in human capital development and saying, it looks contradictory. If you're saying that is what is key in your state,
yes.
He's saying that how come your state also cancelled some scholarship scheme given to some indigents abroad that the state is trying to develop so that when they come back, your state can move beyond where it is?
No, the scholarships were never cancelled. You see, we had very well established structures in Rivers State. We had the Rivers State Scholarship Board. The Scholarship Board had a mandate to organize scholarships, both locally and internationally. In the past administration of Rotimi Amechi, this responsibility, I'm responding to this question.
Yeah, you say it wasn't cancelled.
No, it wasn't cancelled. What the governor did was, look, why was the responsibility for allocating these scholarships divested away from the traditional structures that did this? And it was headed by Lechi Amade, who is a very well-known, highly respected person. Okay. So I know it's important that I respond to this very, very
You've already gotten the answer.
Yes,
it wasn't cancelled.
No, he hasn't cancelled it. Okay. What he did was, look, final year students who are almost finishing their programs, the government will take responsibility for. Okay. And we are talking about 3.5 billion naira for final year students.
Let's bring in this part before we wrap up about research and development.
Yes.
I mean, this is what many countries thrive on. How do we elevate that to a very important role in this country? Take, for instance, the academia, the ivory towers. Many ask too, look, are they contributing their lot to bring this country out of where we are? Although they say they are, but many don't seem to see it.
In Rivers State, what we are doing is to...
I'm talking about generally now.
Yeah, generally, I think what the governments should do at all levels, whether at the state or at the federal level, is to make sure that there is, we declare the universities, technical education centers, colleges of education, as centers of excellence. Remember that in the 80s, the military saw these universities and other schools as centers of opposition, and so they conquered them. And then we saw the gradual slide in the standards. Now, what I think we need to do to rejig the system is to make sure that we declare a disaster as far as education is concerned, which means more funds, means more research, means more collaboration with foreign institutions. And I think that we also need to be very careful about the selection of staff. A situation where people who do not have jobs simply feel that they can go into the university or into any school to teach is something that we should discourage. We should professionalize the sector in such a way that anybody who goes into the sector to teach is a person who has both the qualification and the passion to do that. In Finland,
sorry to interrupt you, but how are you doing that in Rivers? Because some of these things might be easier said than done.
In Rivers State, what the governor over the past 7 months has done is to say, look, all our universities are centers of excellence. Just yesterday, he went to inspect. On Saturday, he went to inspect key schools. I mean, all the well-known schools, of the old River State, Elitona High School, Oromenike, Baptist High School, Pricker Grammar School, we are going to invest massively in their revamping. But that's not where it stops. We are going to standardize them to the point where there will be specific centers for ICT. Our schools are going to be linked to e-libraries that our students are going to have direct access to global sources of learning. That is what we are doing. So it's not enough simply to say, we are building new infrastructure. We are dynamizing the sector in such a way that people will have access to education everywhere simply by clicking the button. That's what we are doing. In all senatorial zones in Rivers State, we are going to have centers of excellence in learning.
Okay, Dr. Tam-George, Commissioner for Information in Rivers State, thank you for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me.